Now let me tell you about the most notorious death trap in the known galaxy. The Black Hole Arena on Sector 7 had a perfect track record, and by perfect I mean perfectly deadly. 100% fatality rate. Not 99.9%, not mostly fatal with occasional maiming, 100% dead. Every single time. Commissioner Vex stood in his luxury viewing booth, all four of his purple tentacles wrapped around a steaming cup of whatever passes for coffee when you don't have a digestive system. He was proud of that statistic. Really proud. The kind of proud that comes from running the galaxy's premier gladiatorial deathmatch for 3 decades without a single survivor to mess up the paperwork. Another glorious day of profitable carnage, Vex announced to nobody in particular, because talking to yourself is way less crazy when you have 4 brains to keep the conversation interesting. Down in the preparation chambers, Zorkath the Destroyer was doing what he did best. Destroying things. Specifically, punching bags filled with synthetic meat that bore an unfortunate resemblance to his last 17 opponents. Zorkath stood 9 feet tall, had biceps the size of compact cars, and a resume that read like a war crimes tribunal. He'd never lost a fight, mostly because his previous opponents had all died horribly in the arena before getting the chance to fight him properly. Today will be different, Zorkath growled, flexing muscles that had their own gravitational pull. Today, I face the arena itself. That's when Jake Murphy walked in. Jake Murphy from Earth. Jake Murphy who stood exactly 5 feet 10 inches in his work boots. Jake Murphy who was carrying a folding lawn chair under one arm and a brown paper bag that smelled suspiciously like ham and mustard under the other. "Excuse me," Jake said, approaching the registration desk with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for people ordering coffee or asking for directions. "Is this where I sign up for the tournament thing?" The registration clerk, a blob-like creature named Glub, stared at Jake's equipment with all 6 of his eye stalks. "Sir," Glub burbled through his translator, "are you absolutely certain you understand what you're signing up for?" Jake glanced at his watch. "Yeah, some kind of arena challenge, right? Should be done by lunch." Glub's eye stalks started twitching in what could charitably be called panic. In his 3 years of registration duty, nobody had ever asked about lunch breaks during the sign-up process for ritualistic death. "Sir, perhaps you should review the waiver forms," Glub suggested, sliding a tablet across the desk that was roughly the size of a small refrigerator. Particularly sections 47 through 93, regarding the permanence of death and the non-refundable nature of your life force. Jake picked up the tablet with one hand, which was impressive considering most species needed a forklift. He scrolled through it like he was checking his email. Lots of legal stuff here. Do you guys have a shorter version, maybe bullet points?" Meanwhile, Commissioner Vex had noticed the commotion through his security monitors. He activated his intercom with the kind of dramatic flair that comes from watching too many sports broadcasts. "Glub, what's the holdup? We have a schedule to maintain and shareholders to disappoint if we don't kill someone soon." "Sir," Glub whispered into his communicator, "we have a situation. The human seems to think this is some kind of recreational activity." Vex's 4 brains processed this information at different speeds, which created a fascinating cascade effect of confusion across his tentacled face. Did he bring weapons? Armor? A ceremonial death poem? No, sir. He brought lunch. That's when Blackson Prime, the arena's announcer, burst into the registration area. Blackson was what happened when you gave a used car salesman the ability to manipulate sound waves and a healthy addiction to performance-enhancing stimulants. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted gelatinous life forms," Blackson boomed, his voice carrying the kind of artificial enthusiasm that made dental surgery seem appealing by comparison. "Are we ready for today's spectacular demonstration of futile resistance against the fundamental forces of the universe?" Jake looked up from the waiver forms. "Oh, are you the host? Great. Quick question. Do you have Wi-Fi here? I need to check my messages." Blackson's mouth hung open, revealing 3 rows of teeth that had been surgically enhanced for better acoustics. Zorkath chose that moment to make his grand entrance, because timing is everything in the murder business. He burst through the preparation chamber doors, roared something about eternal glory, and immediately stopped when he saw Jake sitting there with his sandwich bag, calmly filling out paperwork like he was applying for a library card. "This," Zorkath announced, pointing one massive claw at Jake, "is my opponent." Jake waved. "Hi there, I'm Jake. Nice to meet you." 10 minutes later, Jake found himself standing at the entrance to the Black Hole Arena, and honestly, he was a little disappointed. After all the dramatic build-up and the frankly excessive paperwork, he'd expected something more impressive than what looked like a large metal donut with a spinning thing in the middle. "Behold!" Blackson announced over the arena's sound system, his voice echoing off the walls with the kind of reverb that suggested someone had gotten really excited with the audio equipment. The inescapable maw of oblivion itself. Jake squinted at the spinning void in the center of the arena. Huh, is that supposed to be the black hole? Commissioner Vex leaned forward in his booth, all four tentacles pressed against the reinforced viewing window. Witness, human, the gravitational anomaly that has claimed the lives of 10,000 warriors. 10,003, Zorkoth corrected from the arena floor because accuracy in murder statistics was apparently very important to him. Jake walked to the edge of the arena, set down his chair, and pulled out what appeared to be a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then did something that had never been done in the 3-decade history of the Black Hole Arena. He laughed. Not a maniacal laugh of someone who'd lost their mind facing certain death. Not a bitter laugh of resignation. Just a regular, everyday laugh of someone who just figured out a particularly obvious joke. "Oh man," Jake said, still chuckling as he unfolded his lawn chair. "You guys are serious about this, aren't you?" The arena fell silent except for the ominous humming of the not actually a jag hole in the center. Jake positioned his chair at what everyone else considered a completely random angle, about 15 feet from the edge of the spinning void. He sat down, opened his sandwich bag properly, and took another bite of what was clearly a ham and Swiss on rye. "The gravitational pull should have him by now," Zorkoth muttered, confused by the lack of dramatic screaming and flailing. "Any second now," Commissioner Vex agreed, though his voice carried the first hint of uncertainty it had shown in 30 years. Jake crossed his legs, balanced his sandwich on his knee, and looked up at the viewing booth. "So," he called out conversationally, "who designed this thing? Because I've got some questions about the engineering." Jake took another bite of his sandwich and gestured toward the spinning void with his free hand, like a professor pointing at a particularly interesting equation on a whiteboard. "See, here's the thing," he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the ominous humming. "This isn't actually a black hole. It's just a really big centrifuge with some fancy lighting effects." Commissioner Vex's tentacles started twitching in what could only be described as bureaucratic panic. "Impossible. Our scientists confirmed the gravitational anomaly reading." "Oh sure, there's definitely artificial gravity being generated," Jake agreed, unwrapping the second half of his sandwich. "But whoever built this thing made a classic mistake. They assumed that raw gravitational force was the only factor that mattered." He stood up from his chair, sandwich still in hand, and walked closer to the spinning void. The crowd gasped. Zorkoth roared something about honor and death. Jake just kept talking like he was explaining why the office printer was jammed again. "What you've got here is a basic gravitational slingshot effect, right? Big spinning mass creates artificial gravity, pulls objects toward the center, and theoretically nothing can escape once it crosses the event horizon." Jake paused to take another bite. "Except that's not how physics actually works when you factor in rotational momentum and angular velocity." He pointed to a specific spot on the arena floor with his sandwich. "See that scorch mark there? And that one over there? Those are impact points where previous contestants got sucked in. But look at the pattern they make." Blackson's voice had lost all of its theatrical flair. "What pattern?" "They're all clustered in the same 3 zones, Jake explained patiently, which means the gravitational field isn't uniform. It's got dead spots, where the artificial gravity generators don't quite overlap properly." Jake sat back down in his chair, which happened to be positioned in one of those exact dead spots. "Plus, and this is the really obvious part, the whole system is designed around the assumption that contestants will panic and run toward the edges when they feel the pull. But if you just sit down and distribute your weight properly, the gravitational force isn't strong enough to overcome basic inertia." He demonstrated by rocking slightly in his chair. Nothing happened. "The trick is finding the right angle. See, the gravity field is strongest at a 45-degree angle from the center, but weakest at about 17 degrees, so you position yourself at 17 degrees, keep your center of gravity low, and Bob's your uncle." "Who's Bob?" Zorkoth asked, genuinely confused. "It's a human expression, means it's easy." Jake finished his first sandwich and pulled out what appeared to be a bag of chips. "Honestly, I'm surprised nobody figured this out before. Did anyone ever try just sitting down and thinking about it?" The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when an entire galactic entertainment industry realizes it's been built on a fundamental misunderstanding of basic physics. "Also," Jake added, crunching on a chip, "your artificial gravity generators are about 30% more powerful than they need to be. You're wasting a lot of energy." Commissioner Vex felt what humans would recognize as the distinct sensation of his entire career imploding in real time. His four brains were processing the implications at different speeds, which created a fascinating cascade of panic that rippled through all his tentacles simultaneously. "This is impossible," Vex announced, though his voice had lost the confident authority it had carried for 3 decades. "The arena has been operational for 30 years. We've had teams of engineers, physicists, and death sport consultants verify its lethality." Jake looked up from his bag of chips. When was the last time any of those consultants actually went into the arena? The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable, which in galactic standard time units was approximately 14 seconds. "I see," Jake said diplomatically. "So you've been running theoretical models without empirical testing. That's your first problem right there." From the preparation chambers, a voice squeaked, Excuse me, sir?" Everyone turned to see a small, nervous alien who looked like someone had crossed a ferret with a pocket calculator. This was Pip, the arena's original designer, who had spent the last 30 years hiding in the engineering department and hoping nobody would ask him any detailed questions. "Pip," Commissioner Vex said slowly, his voice carrying the kind of dangerous calm that preceded either enlightenment or homicide, "would you care to explain to our guest why his analysis is incorrect?" Pip's ears drooped so low they nearly touched the floor. "Well, sir, the thing is, when I originally designed the arena, I was working off theoretical models from the Galactic Physics Institute, and, I may have made some assumptions about the testing protocols." "What kind of assumptions?" Jake asked, genuinely curious now. "I assumed someone else would test it," Pip admitted in a voice so small it needed its own gravitational field to remain audible. "And then, when the first contestant died, everyone was so impressed with the efficiency that I didn't want to, disappoint anyone by mentioning the potential design flaws." Zorkath, who had been remarkably quiet during this technical discussion, finally exploded. "This is unacceptable. I demand a proper challenge. Fight me, human, claw to claw, strength against strength, in the ancient way of warriors." Jake looked at Zorkath thoughtfully while finishing his chips. "What's your day job?" "I am a professional destroyer of worlds and crusher of dreams." "Yeah, but what do you do for work?" "Destroy things professionally?" "Right, but who pays you? Do you have an employer? Benefits? A retirement plan?" Zorkath's massive shoulders sagged slightly. "I work for the Galactic Entertainment Corporation. Human Resources says I'm technically classified as a spectacle enhancement specialist." Jake nodded sympathetically. "Ah, corporate life, I get it. Well, for what it's worth, I'm a civil engineer. I design bridges and parking structures, so this whole Mortal Kombat thing isn't really in my skill set, but I'd be happy to help you guys fix your arena." 3 months later, the facility formerly known as the Black Hole Arena had been rebranded as the Moderate Gravitational Inconvenience Challenge, and business was surprisingly good. Jake's consulting work had transformed the death trap into what he called a reasonably entertaining physics demonstration with snacks. The artificial gravity generators now operated at optimal efficiency. The dead zones had been mapped and clearly marked with helpful signs that read, "Safe Sitting Engineer," and Pip had been promoted to Chief Safety Engineer with a salary that didn't require him to live in fear of accidental genocide charges. Commissioner Vex had initially resisted the changes, but it turned out that insurance premiums for non-lethal entertainment were significantly lower than those for ritualistic murder, and the Galactic Entertainment Corporation's shareholders were surprisingly enthusiastic about improved profit margins. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted gelatinous life forms," Blackson announced over the arena's sound system, his voice carrying the same theatrical enthusiasm but now directed toward considerably less homicidal activities. "Welcome to today's demonstration of applied gravitational physics, sponsored by Murphy's Sandwich Solutions." Jake had set up a small concession stand near the safe sitting areas, selling what he claimed were the galaxy's best ham and Swiss sandwiches. The fact that most alien species couldn't actually digest Earth food hadn't stopped them from buying sandwiches as novelty items, and Jake's business plan of charge premium prices for exotic human cuisine was working better than anyone had expected. Zorkath, who had been retrained as the facility's new head of visitor safety, stood near the entrance holding a clipboard and cheerfully explaining gravitational physics to tourists. His employee satisfaction ratings had improved dramatically once his job description changed from "kill people" to "prevent people from accidentally killing themselves." Jake said to Pip as they watched another group of visitors safely navigate the gravitational field while eating sandwiches, "humans have a saying about turning lemons into lemonade." "What's a lemon?" Pip asked. Never mind. The point is, sometimes the best solution to a problem is realizing it was never really a problem in the first place.